Hello everyone, Darren from DrayTek Australia and New Zealand, and welcome to Island Technology's presentation on DrayTek VigorACS 3. This is part 6 of our webinar series. In today's presentation, we'll be looking at provisioning of CPE devices. This is a continuation of our training series to allow you to successfully install and configure various components of VigorACS 3 to allow you to easily manage your customer networks. Here's an outline of what we'll be covering. We'll start with what is meant by the term provisioning and the TR069 parameters used in the provisioning process. We'll then look at the different provisioning parameter menu options in ACS3, which are Global Parameters, CPE Set Parameters, and CPE Keep Parameters. And to finish off, we'll look at how firmware upgrades can be done using the provisioning process. Okay, let's start by looking at what provisioning is. In VigorACS 3, provisioning refers to the process of creating configuration profiles using TR069 parameters that can then be applied to numerous CPE devices. CPE is an abbreviation for Customer Premises Equipment and refers to routers, access points and switches. These profiles created are XML scripts which ACS 3 will apply to the required devices. We'll go into more detail shortly on how this is done. Be aware that the provisioning feature in ACS 3 can only be configured by a system administrator, a group administrator, or administrator. For more information about the different roles that can be assigned to ACS 3 users, check out the third webinar in this series called User Management. I'll leave links to all the previous webinars in this series in the description below. Clicking on the provisioning icon in ACS 3 will display 4 menu options, which are Global Parameters, CPE Set Parameters, CPE Keep Parameters, and Firmware Upgrade. Before we get into those menu options, it helps to have an understanding of TR069 parameters. As we discussed in part 1 of this webinar series, VigorACS 3 utilises the TR069 standard for communication between the ACS server and the CPE devices. TR069 is an application layer protocol for remote management of end-user devices. It was developed for automatic configuration of modems, routers, gateways, access points and so on by using an auto-configuration server. A quick recap of the TR069 communication process. The connection between the CPE device and the ACS server isn't permanent and is called a provisioning session. It happens only at specific points in time determined by the periodic inform interval set in the CPE and usually lasts for several seconds, exchanging all necessary messages. The provisioning session is initiated by the CPE device, but the ACS server can send a connection request to tell the CPE device to contact the ACS server. This comes in handy when configuration changes need to be deployed immediately instead of waiting for the CPE device to initiate the provisioning session. Be aware that all settings in DrayTek CPE devices have an associated TR069 parameter. To get a list of all these parameters in a router, you can telnet to it using its CLI and run the command sys TR069 get internet gateway device with a dot at the end. Bear in mind this will produce a very long listing. For the Vigor 2865 there's over 27,000 parameters. To see a smaller listing, say for example wireless LAN settings, you can run the command sys TR069 get internet gateway device dot x_00507f _wireless LAN. That will still produce a fairly long list, but it should be more manageable. Here we have an extract of the TR069 parameter list to give you an idea of what it looks like. Okay, now that we have a basic understanding of provisioning and TR069 parameters, let's have a look at the provisioning menu options in VigorACS 3, starting with Global Parameters. Global parameters allow you to apply the same configuration to all CPEs, including access points, at the same time without the need to configure each device individually. It's suitable and convenient when several CPE devices of the same model need to be configured with the same settings and values. One example shown here is changing the admin password on all the routers to the same one. Another is if you need to configure a common firewall settings in all routers within an organisation. For example, you may want to block YouTube on all routers within the organisation, which may span over several locations. When you click on the Global Parameters menu in ACS3, you'll notice several options. The first one is Profile Edit Mode. This is where you can click on the plus add option and create a new configuration profile. I'll go through an example of that one later. Next we have All, which will display all the configured profiles. The Web UI view displays the profile on a web interface matching the UI of the CPE device. XML file will display the profiles in XML format if you wish to inspect the settings or make changes. Finally, we have Parameter List, which displays the parameter settings for each CPE. Once you've created a profile, you can save it as an XML file by clicking on the XML template option. Here we have a listing of configured profiles showing the names of each profile as well as some other information in the columns to the right. You can also edit, delete or copy to a different profile as well. Okay, let's go through the steps to create a new profile. Clicking on plus add in Profile Edit mode will bring up a menu to start creating a new profile. There's three methods you can use to create the profile. The first one is to sample an online device. Here you select a similar device from the network group, and using the web UI you simply select the configuration options to change and save the profile. The second option is to select an existing XML file and use this as a template to create your own XML file. The last option is to create a new parameter list. Down the bottom you'll see scheduling options to allow provisioning to be run according to a configured time schedule. Let's take a look at the steps for each of these three options, starting with sampling from an online device. So first select the network where the device you want to sample exists. In the example here we've selected the sd-wan user group. Then at Create Profile By, select Sampling from an online device. Give the profile a name and then click Edit to select a device. That'll give you a list of available CPE devices to choose from, and you should see the device you have in mind amongst them. Next, the Always Keep option will restore the settings to the CPE if they get accidentally changed by a user. For example, you may want to always keep the same admin password, but if someone changes it, ACS3 will restore it to the original setting at the next periodic inform update. When finished, the page should now look similar to this, with the required options selected and the selected CPE device shown along with its firmware version. Now click on Add to add the profile to the profile list. The profile we created is called Test and appears at the bottom of the list as highlighted here. The next step is to click Edit to start customizing the profile. You'll see available menu options matching those of the router selected. Now it's just a matter of selecting the menu options required and saving the profile. When completed, you can click on the parameter checklist to see the TR069 settings selected. The parameter checklist should look similar to this. Once the profiles are created, the next step is to go to the Network and Devices menu for the required user group, then select the required CPE. You'll notice a couple of default profiles in the list, which are As Parent and Empty. Choosing As Parent means the profile will inherit the settings used in the previous layer. Empty means no profile is to be applied. Here we selected the Vigor2927 LAC router and are going to apply the profile we created called Test. Once selected, click Save. That will then initiate the provisioning process based on the settings in the profile. If you wish to see how the provisioning process went, just click on the View Log link for the profile. It'll show details such as success, indicated by the green circle, and the percentage of completion. Okay, let's check out an example of using the sampling method to create a global profile to reset the admin passwords on routers if they have been accidentally changed. So we have a subnetwork here called sd-wan, which contains several routers such as a 2865AX, a 2866 LAC and a 2927 LAC. The 2866 LAC is the one we want to sample, so we go to the Provisioning tab and select Global Parameters. Click Add and beside Create Profile By, select Sampling from an online device. Give it a profile name. We'll just run with 2866 for this example. Then go to the user group and select the SD-WAN network, Then click on Edit beside Select Device and select the 2866 LAC. We'll run with the Always Keep option, so if anyone tries to change any of these settings, it'll restore back to whatever we set here in the next provisioning session. We also have an option to reboot the CPE after provisioning, but we don't really need to do that for a password change, so we'll leave it off. We want this to happen now, so we won't worry about setting a schedule. Then just click on Add. Now we want to edit that profile template we just created, so we click on Edit. Then go to the System tab. Then go to the admin account. Now we want to re-enter the desired password. For example, let's use admin1234. Check if any of these other options are needed or not. Then click Save. Now we need to select the devices we want to change according to that template. So under the Network and Devices tab, expand the SD-WAN network and make sure that the 2866 profile ID is selected for each device we want to change. We also have two APs here we'll leave as parent, then just click Save to save the setup. And done. Let's check the log to see how that went. So our 3 routers and one of the APs have all gone through, and we're just waiting on the AP903 to update. We'll just give that one a bit longer and come back and check it again later. Okay. The second method to create a new global profile is to use sampling from an XML file. To do this, select that option from the pull-down list and then select a pre-configured XML file on your PC. If you don't have a pre-configured XML file, you can download a template by clicking on the XML template download link. You'll then see a message appear advising you that the XML file is separated into 2 parts and that you'll need to edit it. The first section is named Items. This is where you list the TR-069 parameters you're going to use and give them an ID number. The second section, named Profiles, is where you assign values to the TR-069 parameters identified by the parameter ID. At the top of section 2, there's a variable called isKeep, which can be either true or false. This is the equivalent to the Always Keep option we looked at earlier. In the example here, we're configuring the router admin password, WAN connection settings, and the NTP settings. This method is a lot more complicated and time-consuming than using the sampling from an online device method, but if you're keen, you can find more information about it in Knowledge Base Article 6107, which I'll leave in the description below. As mentioned earlier, you can get a listing of all the TR-069 parameters from a router by using the telnet command sys TR-069 get internet gateway device dot. The third method to create a new global profile is to select Creating a New Parameter List from the pull-down menu. Give it a name. We called this one New List in this example. You can also select the Always Keep and Reboot after provisioning options if required, as well as selecting the provisioning time. Then just click Add to save the new profile. Once saved, you'll be able to see the profile in the parameter list view, and you can click Edit to make changes. That'll bring up the configuration page where you can enter the required TR-069 parameters and their values. You can either get the TR-069 parameters from the list downloaded from the CPE device, or an easier way is to copy from the parameter list in ACS3. To find it, go to the Configuration menu and select the Advanced sub-menu. Then select Parameter Tree to display the TR-069 parameters. Then select the required parameter and click on the Copy button. That'll copy it to the clipboard. You can then paste it into Notepad and do the same with other parameters. Once you've picked all your parameters, you can copy them to the parameter list global profile. Once the profiles are created, the provisioning process is the same as we showed earlier. Select the required CPE and apply the profile. In this case, we're going to apply the profile we created called New List to a 2927 LAC. Then just click Save to initiate the provisioning. The next provisioning topic we'll now look at is CPE Set Parameters. CPE Set Parameters is suitable when you have several CPE devices of the same model type that need to be configured with different settings and values. For example, you may have several sites using the same model wireless router, but you want each site to have a unique Wi-Fi SSID. This is different to global parameters where all CPE devices of the same model type have identical settings. The process involves creating an XML file with the required settings. It'll need the CPE MAC address or its IP address in this case to identify the device to be provisioned. Once selected, click on Continue to start adding the required parameters. That'll bring up this page where you can select the required parameters and adjust the settings needed. Then click Save. The final step is to click on the Deploy It link and it'll start the provisioning process. The third provisioning item is CPE Keep Parameters. CPE Keep Parameters allows you to specify which CPE configuration parameters to restore if they've been accidentally changed or deleted. This is the same as the Always Keep option when creating global profiles we demonstrated earlier, where we use this function to restore the router password after it had been changed. So you just select the CPE from the list, then click on Edit to start editing the profile. That'll give you a menu list matching the web UI of the CPE. Here you can select the required setting, for example the admin password, where you can enter a password that you don't want to be changed once it's been set. Clicking on Save will start the provisioning process. The final provisioning topic we'll look at today is Firmware Upgrade. Firmware upgrades can be done to individual CPEs through the Maintenance menu, but if you wish to apply the firmware upgrade to all CPE devices in a network group, then it's more convenient to use the provisioning process, especially if you have a large number of CPE devices that need to be upgraded at once. This saves a lot of time over doing them manually one by one. The first step is to upload the required firmware to the ACS3 server. To do this, go to the Maintenance menu and under File Manager, click on the Upload option. This will prompt you to select a firmware file to upload from your PC. The files are placed in the shared firmware folder in the server, ready for you to select when you create the provisioning profile. The next step is to go to the Firmware Upgrade option in the Provisioning menu. Here click on Add to create a new profile. You can then start to edit the profile. Give it a name, enable it, and select a scheduled time and date to carry out the firmware updates. You'll need to select the model type, and you can also get ACS3 to check if the current installed firmware in the CPE matches the selected criteria. In our example here, we've entered that if the CPE doesn't have firmware version 4.4.0, then upgrade the firmware. That way, if it does have it already, then it won't bother doing it again. At the bottom of the profile, select the required firmware from the shared firmware folder in the server, then click Save to save the profile. At the scheduled time, ACS3 will start upgrading the CPE devices that match the profile criteria. Okay, we've reached the end of the presentation today. To summarise, we started by looking at what provisioning is and how TR-069 parameters are involved. We looked at provisioning using global parameters, where there's 3 methods that can be used to create profiles. These were sampling from an online device, sampling from an XML file, and creating a new parameter list. Other provisioning options we looked at were CPE Set Parameters, CPE Keep Parameters, and Firmware Upgrade. In upcoming webinars, we'll be looking at more ACS3 topics, including network management and maintenance tasks, and I hope you'll return to watch those. Okay, that's all for now, but please stay tuned. We'll be answering questions in the live chat on the right of your screen for the next 5 minutes. For more information about DrayTek products, please check out our website at www.draytek.com.au or send us an email to sales@draytek.com.au or give us a call on 02 9838 8899. Please like and subscribe below, and if you'd like a notification anytime we put up a new video, please give the bell a click too. Thanks and bye for now.